Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're here tonight for another stimulating, fascinating conversation on the Chazak X-Files, where we are going to break down some of the greatest conspiracy theories of the last century. We've had the privilege of having conversations about the aliens, and we got a lot of really positive feedback. I want to thank all of you that are sending your messages. I want to thank all those that sponsored the classes who want to be anonymous. We also did a class on the Illuminati. We spent time talking about last week about virtual reality. A lot of fascinating conversation was drummed up with that conversation. A lot of very interesting questions about free will, pain, pleasure, and so on and so forth. And tonight we are going to have a conversation about the Rothschild family. This famous banking family that is shrouded with so much mystery and conspiracy. Let's try to break it down tonight and see if we can walk away with some meaningful insight into the world, the life of these two fascinating, this one fascinating family. My co-pilot my pilot is Rabbi Lawrence Hadjoff. And
Hello.
tonight we're going to try to walk away with some more insight into who this family is and their contributions and why I believe so much of their story is really just another expression of anti-Semitism. So let's just start at the beginning. Okay, the Rothschild family is a famous banking family, if you don't know, super wealthy family. Their family has been involved in money lending since the 15th century. Rothschild in German means Rothschild, which means red shield. Like most Jews at the time in Europe, they were unwelcome, but welcome. And this was the caveat. Jews were very good at handling money. They were certainly very good at making money. And they were also barred from any land ownership. They were barred from all kinds of professions, but one, and that was money lending. And it worked very, very well for the non-Jews. The non-Jews in Europe were mostly Christian, and they followed very strict adherence to the Christian law. The church was also like the main form of power in those regions, and they pretty much set up a standard that, hey, there's no usury, no lending money with interest, but Jews who were not Christian did not have to follow that law. And therefore, Christian Jews would often be the lenders, or what we call court Jews. Court Jews served these wealthy royal families. They would help invest the funds of these super wealthy families. And what would end up happening is not only would they be responsible for the management of those funds, but they would also be responsible for the safekeeping of these funds. In essence, they became bankers.
Right.
And they had international connections because they were smart enough to recognize different threats. And that if you leave your assets in one area, you were subject to all kinds of war and whatnot, and therefore lose your wealth. So they created something called diversification, which I believe is not uniquely the Rothschilds idea. It's an idea that's brought down the Talmud itself, which says that you should have a third of your funds in cash, a third in real estate, and then a third of other kinds of commodities. So we talk about hedging in the Talmud. That's 2,000 years ago, and the truth is, when we think about bank and bankers, the Babylonian Jews were known for their banking skills. So much of the banking world actually came from there. But now Jews that were brought out into Europe are finally given some position of power and authority as they were growing from the 15th century on. Someone by the name of Meyer Rothschild. He was the genius that helped create the family fund and fortune. He had 5 children. They established banks in 5 different countries: in England, France, Germany, Vienna, and or Austria, and Paris. And as they established their connections and wealth, they helped serve the wealthiest families in Europe, and then by default creating international trade. I don't want to spend too much about the family, but imagine this for a moment. You have Jews, spread out into these 5 different countries, and they're amassing lots of wealth. Okay. And they're behind different political figures. They're behind all kinds of interesting, wars and making money off these wars. So naturally, there's going to be all kinds of people whispering with because of envy and jealousy. So Rabbi Hadjoff,
Yeah.
that's the family in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, they basically, the Rothschilds had everything you needed for a great Jewish conspiracy. They were super rich. They're probably the richest family in their day, probably the richest family in the world, possibly, in the late 1700s and the 1800s, and this carried on for a while. They had worldwide influence. There was a lot of wars going on. There was the Battle of Waterloo. You had France and Britain. Eventually had wars in America as well. And as a very wealthy family, they were supporting various sides. However, the problem was that anti-Semitism, which we'll talk about in a moment, because this is just one form of anti-Semitism, but it's persisted. And they looked at this family who were very rich, had worldwide influence, and were very secretive. Those 3 recipes really made them, and still make them. We're going to give some real recent examples of how this family, although they have, lost a lot of their wealth, it was all pretty much spread out to many, many families, and their influence is almost non-existent. However, the anti-Semitism that comes with this family, they really start to epitomize the idea of the economic Jew who is using their wealth and their connections and their power to influence people and governments and secret societies throughout the world. So when it comes to conspiracy theories, which is our, the theme of all of our topics over these weeks, this family, the Rothschilds, we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, obviously, but the Rothschilds just kind of like fit every single bill that you need in order to see how strong anti-Semitism was in Europe, in Russia. This didn't come out of nowhere. Anti-Semitism has been around for thousands of years. Just that the Rothschilds kind of fell perfectly into this framework of the Jew controlling, having too much wealth, too much power, too much say in governments, in wars, use their influence just to build up and decide what happens to the world. And this is really what the Rothschilds still to this day are subject to. I'll give you a crazy example in a few moments of how, as recent as 2018, members of the American government still come out with these absurd ideas when it comes to these absurd ideas when it comes to the Rothschild family and their insane influence. So let me just share this. I want to share what we're doing right now onto my social medias. Start where we are now.
Rabbi Hadjoff, as you're looking up, do you mind if I ask a question? I think the audience might be thinking about is, well, there were lots of wealthy non-Jewish families.
Yeah.
You have the princes, you have the monarchs and their families, and these other wealthy, non-Jewish families. Why does anti-Semitism or this hatred or jealousy spring up for these Jewish families?
Okay, so this is a much bigger thing. Obviously, the Rothschilds are just one form of anti-Semitism. You basically have, I like to say, 6 reasons, excuses as to why they hate us. Okay, in Jewish history, and we'll try to find the root of it all right after that. Basically, they hate us for racial theories, which the Jews are hated because we're an inferior race. That's one form, right? This is what Hitler satisfied a few of these 6 reasons, but this was one of them, that we are hated because we're an inferior race. We're not up to their standards as a racial, although we're not a race, right? We're a nation. Race would mean that we all look the same and have, an ethnicity that obviously we don't, because we're from all over the world. And so that's absurdity, obviously, but that's one excuse for hating Jews.
Another thing is the outsiders. Jews are hated because they're different than the rest of society, right? We act different, we eat different, we have different culture and holidays. So that's another reason why we're hated, which is not just exclusive to the Jewish people. The other, of course, is their side. The Jews are hated because they killed Jesus, which was big for a long time. We don't see that much nowadays, although there's murmurings of that as well. The other is scapegoat, right? We're just a convenient group to single out and blame for all the troubles that are in the world. Chosen people, yeah. Jews are hated because they arrogantly claim that they're the chosen people. Now, even this chosenness, which is not really our discussion today, but we're going to touch upon it because there's an idea that we, the Jewish people, were chosen by God to fulfill the Torah and the mitzvot in the Torah. Right? Not that we're better than, we just have a different mission in this world. And that's not a mission that's exclusive to us. Many people can live up to their chosen personal and national goals and visions. However, for the Jewish people, this ended up becoming one of the canards, one of the ways that the anti-Semites hated us, the chosen idea. And finally, and that's really, this final one really fits into our topic today, the economics of it. Jews are hated because they possess too much wealth, too much power, start wars, and we're going to see a little bit later, even control the climate and the weather. This is something we're still, still today, and the Rothschilds are actually used as one of the proofs that we control the weather. So we're going to come to that as well in a few moments. But if you pull those together, those are going to be the 6 reasons. Now, we can go even deeper and go further back, because anti-Semitism did not start with the protocols of the elders of Zion, right? This fake meeting supposedly happened in Russia. It was actually made by the Russian authorities, that the Jewish people are having secret meetings. By the way, I always want to know where these meetings are, because
we're never invited. We're never invited.
I'm on social media. I meet a lot of people. Get me an invite so I can get involved and make something out of this. It's only when things are going well for the Jews, right? When the Jews are being rounded up, right, by the Nazis or by the Egyptians, whoever in history, suddenly that doesn't exist. But this was one of the. But we have to go right back. We have to go back because anti-Semitism goes back. Abraham was hated for who he was, right? We know that Nimrod tried to kill him. We know that the Jewish people left Egypt, a poor nation, and yet Amalek, this nation, came to attack us. And as we move forward in history, we know that the Babylonians hated the Jewish people in their own country, doing their own thing with their own temple. Not good enough. We want them out. And then we have the whole Purim story, and we have Haman, who, according to our tradition, is part of Amalek as well. So we're dealing with him and his hatred. Then we go back to Israel, and the Greeks come in after 200 years, and then the Romans destroy the temple and cause us so much pain and suffering. And we have pogroms and holocausts and exiles. It doesn't stop. It usually fits into one of the 6 reasons that I gave you: economic, chosen people, scapegoat, deicide, outsiders, or racial theory. But those are not causes of anti-Semitism. They're excuses of anti-Semitism. So I want to give you just
one second, slow down for a second. You're saying that anti-Semitism is really irrational.
It is irrational, yeah. They try to find a rationality to it, and people believe the irrational. People believe conspiracy theories, right? People believe the Jewish people are going to control the world, but it is illogical. But just because it's irrational, illogical, doesn't mean people don't take it upon themselves, right? The Germans believed that the Jewish people had certain racial features that made them inferior to the pure German Aryan race. So just because it's irrational doesn't mean that it doesn't cause us tremendous, tremendous harm. So that's really what we're dealing with when we talk about the Rothschilds. It's just another form of anti-Semitism. And they just kind of fit perfectly because they were secretive. They did have worldwide influence because of their wealth, right, which is very common today among many people in many nations. And there was a certain secretive quality to them. So they really fit into the idea of starting the wars and the whole banking system, which they were involved in. But people really believed, and still believe today, they use that for nefarious purposes and make it an excuse in order to kill us. But why is that? And that's the very big question. I want to give one possible answer, which maybe help us understand, before we go into more details, because I have a lot more on this particular family and what this has done to us, this Rothschild conspiracy of Jewish people controlling banks, wars, and the weather and the climate.
Right.
I like to give an example. I want to give an example, if that's okay, of my child leaves a messy room, and she shares a room. My kids share rooms together. And I say to my oldest daughter, when she was a little girl, I would say, "Go tidy up a room." Give me 5 minutes, Abba. I don't want to do it now. 5 minutes come by and say, "Come on, Rachel, it's time to tidy your room." "Nah, I don't want to do it now." 5 minutes later, "Come on." Now, her sister, who didn't make the mess, says, "Okay, I'll do it." And she'll go and she'll tidy it up. While she's walking to tidy it up, her older sister gives her a little bit of an elbow. Right? And doesn't like that. Why? Your younger sister is doing something you don't want to do. What is your problem? Why do we do that? Why is that one child in the class, right, who knows the answers? Why are they bullied and hated? What is that? And the answer is because of their behavior, they're showing up, the sibling or the other kids in the class. You see, the Jewish people for thousands of years have attempted, we haven't always been successful, but attempted to be the moral and ethical voice of the world. Right? We have a Torah, and we have guidance, and we have a culture that speaks of family and ethics and morals and values and a vision for the world to be a better place. We have prophets that speak about the world getting better and becoming good. There's a strong element of anti-Semitism that fits into that paradigm, because in the end, no one wants to be seen as not doing their job. So just our existence, our mere existence in this world kind of makes other nations, other nationalities look bad, which is not the purpose, obviously. The Jewish people are meant to be a light unto the nations, as the prophet Isaiah, right? And in order to be that, there has to be a certain amount of us trying to live up to a higher moral code and standard. I'm not saying we always have, but that's our goal. That doesn't make us better. That makes us a light to shine upon the world.
Don't you think that some of the anti-Semitism that we've seen the last 300 or 400, 500 years, 700 years in Europe, specifically in Europe, where the church controlled the monarchs, the Jews were seen as a constant reminder that they rejected Christianity?
So and that's the deicide argument. The idea that
the deicide argument is specifically that we killed Jesus. Yeah. Is that the same argument that we are the reminder that we rejected Christianity? That the church would often force Jews to, it's interesting, when we say Doro Yikra, right? In the Ashkenazim, if you see, it says V'gam Bavel Asher Gavra.
That's right.
Right? But in the Sephardic venture, it says V'gam Edom Asher Gavra.
Well, that's very interesting.
And the theory is that it was edited for the Ashkenazim because Edom is a reference to the Christians.
Christian world.
So they took it out and they put it in Bavel because they didn't want to deal with the local authorities who were constantly editing and them and so on and so forth. So, so much of what we're seeing, even in the times of the Rothschilds, these were people who were asked and hired by local princes and kings to, protect their funding. And someone over here wrote, in some countries, Jews were put in charge of collecting taxes. Mayer Rothschild was also in charge of collecting the taxes.
Yeah.
These guys were the tax collectors. They were hated for taking everyone hates
paying taxes. Well, that was
taxes.
the only job. We all know that money lending was and taxes was one of the few jobs that was actually allowed to Jews anyway. So they were stuck with that particular job. So that kind of put us again, by the 8 ball, because what would happen? Your ledger would build up. You'd be ending up owing this Jewish person, the money lender, thousands and thousands of rubles, whatever it was. And then if it got too much, you couldn't pay it back. You just killed the Jew. So that was basically one of the main ideas. But now the Rothschild was the idea that, they're using that money and that influence in order to make more money and influence the world.
So how much money do you need to have that kind of, is it even possible that there's a wealthy family today that has the power of influencing world politics, world circumstances?
It's extraordinary because the Rothschilds right now, before we can get to that, don't have that much. I mean, they're obviously still wealthy individuals, but they don't have the kind of money and collateral and power and influence they used to have. And yet people still believe this. They still believe, they talk about the Rothschilds.
You're saying they're not on the Forbes 500 list?
No, I don't think top 1,000 people in the world. I don't believe they are. I just don't believe it. You know, I want to talk about one thing. I'm going to get back to that. There is a famous British conspiracy theorist who I've followed for many years. His name is David Icke. Now, you mention his name and people laugh. I think, he's a Meshuggah. He used to be a sports commentator when I grew up. And then he just went on TV and started espousing a lot of crazy conspiracy theories. I mean, like lizard people, you know, and he still talks about that. And Rothschilds controlling the world. He even wrote a book which sold hundreds of thousands of copies. This is a person still alive today who says that the Jewish people funded Hitler and funded the Holocaust. For what reasons? That's a good question. Money, Israel, Zionism, you know? And he'll talk like this. And his publisher got rid of him. So he started self-publishing. The guy sold 140,000 copies of the book. Now, just so you know, to be a Times bestseller, I don't know how many, I think it's over 10,000 makes you almost right. That's a vast amount. 140,000. He gets 600,000 visits to his website a week.
Wow.
People and
Terrifying.
The comments and the thumbs up, it is terrifying. And what does he do? He has a whole thing on the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are using their power and influence. Now, the Rothschilds do have tremendous power and influence, and they are very Zionistic. I mean, I read today that which I wasn't aware of, the Rothschilds actually paid for the Knesset in Israel and the Supreme Court. So they put a lot of money into Israel, which just adds Zionism, right? The anti-Semitism through Zionism caveat, right? They've kind of thrown that in there as well. And the Rothschilds kind of like, since they gave money to Israel, though many people give money to Israel, but since they're part of that, although this happened a while ago, obviously they're kind of falling into this idea. And people really believe this stuff. People have, and they put a tremendous amount of power into the hands of this now, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but historically relevant, but not a relevant family anymore. So these individuals, to this very day, you can look him up. I don't suggest it, but if you want to, look up David Icke, David Icke. He's all over the internet, books and videos. He travels around the world, and his books are translated to 26 languages. It's just unbelievable the influence this individual has. And he will talk openly about the Rothschild influence. He won't say Jewish influence. This is very important. He'll say the Rothschild's influence. It's just like saying I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. It's just a change of word. It means exactly the same thing. So this Icke is part of this disease, okay? And he's complaining because they used to, in England, they hand out copies of Schindler's List, right? For people to read and to watch. And he says they're indoctrinating the British children to believe this fallacy that is the Holocaust, which the Rothschilds themselves funded in the first place. So this is the insanity we're dealing with, and people are buying into it and they're believing it. What they don't seem to answer, obviously, is, well, if you have so much money, power, and influence, why did the Jewish refugees before the war, during and after, not get accepted into countries? Where was the influence there? I mean, we can break it apart very easy. A 5-year-old can see the fallacy and the fact there's no logic to this whole thing, right? We can all see that, but they still persist, and people buy into this. People buy into this insanity.
Listen, I mean, Benjamin Rothschild, those of you that are following news, a member of the family who's running the Edmund de Rothschild Fund, passed away yesterday, 57 years old. Someone mentioned in the Instagram chat that he was only worth 1.5 billion. Now you have to be mindful, like the wealthiest man in the world was Jeff Bezos at a little bit under 200 billion, who was recently replaced by Elon Musk, 200 billion. Are these new billionaires going to have their own conspiracy theories about them shortly?
Oh, they already do. They already have their own conspiracy theories. There's no doubt about it. Right? They still believe that social media and Bill Gates, this is a whole topic in of itself, is using his money to buy up large amounts of land, and he's trying to get people to die from these vaccines to cull the population. I mean, we're seeing to this day, right? But that's picking on one individual. The problem for us, the Jewish people, is when you pick on the Rothschild family,
you pick on the whole entire Jewish people.
You got the entire Jewish people. That's exactly the problem. Once you start with the Rothschilds is just another word. So people pick on Bill Gates, and they're going to pick on Elon Musk, and they're going to pick on, eventually there's going to be a big conspiracy about Elon Musk trying to do whatever he's trying to do, right? Kill everyone in the world and go to Mars. I don't know. They're going to find something, which is not good, right? But it's not going to affect an entire nation like the Jewish people. And this thing has persisted. I just want to read you this thing. This is unbelievable. I remember when this happened. This is from March 2018. 2018, okay? A DC lawmaker responded to a brief snowfall on Friday. And you can look, this is actually, I'm reading from the Washington Post, but I remember the original video. You can see it. It's online, in which he espoused a conspiracy theory that Jewish financiers control the weather. Now, he is onto something, because the Rothschilds did buy part of the Weather Channel, but that's the news reporting the weather. So what does he say? This DC council member, Trayon White Sr., posted the video to his official Facebook page. As snow flurries were hitting the nation's capital, the video, shot through the windshield of a car driving west on Interstate 695 through downtown Washington, shows snowy skies while he narrates. You watch this video online. And he says, and I'm going to quote him, "Man, it just started snowing out of nowhere this morning. Man, you'll better pay attention to this climate control, man. This climate manipulation," he says, "and DC keep talking about it. We are a resilient city, and that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters they can pay for to own the cities, man. Be careful." Now, we have someone here who is a council member, who's got influence power. He's got thousands of people watching him, and the video went absolutely viral. And of course, they called him out on it, and he had to apologize, and he had to go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., although he was very irritated and left after a few minutes anyway. Right? He just saw a couple of exhibits and walked out. But where does he get this from? This is kind of out of thin air, right? This was years, decades, and if we look at it historically, thousands of years in the making, because we have an idea that Esav Sonet Yaakov. There's always going to be a hatred towards the Jewish people. It's just a basic tenet. And when we see people quote the Rothschilds, right, this old economic, and by the way, you know what's amazing? Sorry, I must tell you this. There's many ways they hate us, right? They say, "You Jews, you're so powerful." And you know the images you can see online of the hands over the globe, you know, like an octopus, the tentacles, right, over the globe, right? That's one form. The Jewish people are using their money power to control the entire world. Hitler, right? Nazi imagery used that a lot. But then there was the Jew is the rat.
All that imagery came from Russia. Way before the Nazis.
They just grabbed hold of it.
Copied and pasted it,
It was brilliant forms of PR, right? And the rat with the mug and Star David on it, propaganda machine they created. The Nazis were great at propaganda. But one thing, Rabbi, they call us complete opposite things.
Yeah.
Either we're completely control of everything, or we're rats running through the dirt who have no money or power because we're just dirty rats in the gutter. But they never ever call us stupid. No anti-Semite has ever called the Jewish people dumb. Interesting, right? And they never seem to like that they'll give us. They're smart. They're using the smarts to do this. They're using their money, power, and brains to do that. But they're never saying, "Oh, you Jews, right? We hate you because you're smart." They never do that. Right? They understand.
There's a post that was written here by Alana Koifman who says that she doesn't have factual sources, but the family's combined, wealth equates between $400 and $450 billion. Yeah, but you remember that the family's very large. It's a large family, so it's like taking, I think that one of the wealthiest families in America,
Right. It's just, I mean, you put it all together, the family, right? But first of all, who says they're using that for this? You can see where the money goes. You can see where the charity goes. Most of the money does not even go to Jewish causes anymore.
Yeah,
unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of very wealthy families out there, right? There's the Koch brothers. There's a lot of wealth and family wealth out there. But what we're saying is something very different. They're using that as a way to get all Jews. That's the problem. That's where the problem begins, ends as well. And that's how you end up with some guy, a DC lawmaker, coming out with these absurd theories that the Jewish people control the weather. We won't say Jews, because that's not PC. We'll say the Rothschilds. We won't say Israel, we'll say the Zionists. They're just the
same.
Still
couching it in the same thing. People don't realize also when it comes to the Rothschild family is that of the 5 brothers that carried on their father's legacy, the one from France went bankrupt. The one from Vienna lost his money because of Hitler. All the other brothers failed, actually. They lost their money. This is the same idea that says that wealth can only stay in a family for 3 generations.
Right.
And then it's lost because, when you get your grandfather's Yerusha, your inheritance, you don't really have the value worth the money, so you burn it. And however much money the Rothschilds have today, it still pales in comparison to the power wealth that they had a few hundred years ago. But we're still going to equate that family with these conspiracy theories because, like Rabbi Hadjaf is saying now, they're Jews, they're rich, they're powerful, they're a euphemism for Jews today, right? They're really controlling everything, and they're wealthy, and they're bankers, and so on and so forth. Interesting.
I mean, that's precisely it. That's what we're seeing now to this very, very day. And this is what the David Icke of this world, and this guy, Trail White, and all these other individuals, let's not say Jew, let's talk about the Rothschild as a way of making that happen. That's exactly it, yeah.
Interesting. And what happens to Israel as a country when Israel as a country becomes this wealthier, more successful? Like we're seeing it right now. Like I'm thinking a lot about this. As these Abraham Accords continue to move forward, and we're making peace with these other countries, and Israel is able to export so much of its, high tech and its agricultural ideas and so on and so forth, that Israel becomes this wealthy place. Does Israel, upend the Rothschild conspiracy, and it switches to the Israel conspiracy?
1,000%. I mean, that's already starting to happen, which ironically is a good thing. That shows that Israel's doing well economically. But you hear it all the time. What exactly is America doing? Giving billions of dollars to Israel, although that's in military hardware, which helps America, and all the money has to be spent in America as well. So it's not just like gift, they're handing out cash like they do to Pakistan, which no one talks about, right? But they'll give you the money, so they end up being spent in America. So it works out well for Israel, but it works out very well for America. They have a close ally. But once again, it's the same thing. Oh, they're taking our money and they're just handing out money to these Jews, to this Zionist state, in order to, enrich themselves, right? The Zionists have taken control of America and taking all of our money. We see this. I mean, there are many politicians in Congress today, many of them are Jewish, who are totally against any form of economic alliance between America and the Zionist state. I don't think Bernie Sanders is too happy with that money that Israel received in terms of its military hardware, which, once again, the bulk of that money has to be spent in the United States as well. So it builds the American economy as well. But yeah, we're seeing that, and we're going to see more and more of that as Israel becomes more and more successful. And let's be honest, when did things get hard for the Jews? When times are bad, right? It's like, when the oil crisis in the early 1970s, what do they say? Burn Jews, not oil. This was the bumper sticker went around. So if, heaven forbid, once things start to get bad economically, right, when you don't have your sports and you don't have your beer and you don't have all the stuff that you love, anti-Semitism. I mean, we've seen it over the past year. There's a lot of anti-Semitism around the world.
Yeah, it's up 600% just in America.
Very, very good. I mean, terrible, but you see that. And it very clearly shows people are stuck at home. There's a lot of economic problems dealing with this whole COVID crisis, right? Once again, it's the Jews and the swastikas, right, on synagogue doors in Europe, in America, in Canada, right? This is what we're dealing with today, very, very clearly, and it's not going to get any better. It's not going to, as Israel grows and expands and starts to make more alliances around the world, we're going to see this anti-Semitism focus a lot more on Israel. I mean, you have the overt anti-Semitism, these Iranian nuclear bombs. They're trying to, but I mean, it was for a while just the Goliath. Israel's the Goliath, and the Palestinians are the David. So they use that whole idea of the warmongering Jew. Suddenly we're warmongers, right? We finally build an army to defend ourselves. But I think it's going to shift a lot more to the financial. And here's my prediction too, and I've thought about this a lot. We're going to start to see, because Israel's very, very good at the cyber security and cyber world. And we know that they do a lot of work in that world, which by definition is a secretive world, which we know for sure actually, exists. There's special Israeli army units that have tremendous power when it comes to uncovering cyber plots against the world and stopping, centrifuges in Iran and nuclear facilities. We're going to see that as well start to raise its ugly head as well.
Interesting. So it's inevitable because of our success. We're going to be the target, accompanied with the 6 reasons that you gave us for anti-Semitism. It looks like it's not going anywhere. It looks like anti-Semitism is here to stay. And not only is it staying, it's actually growing and thriving.
Yeah. Having said that, having said all this, we know in the end, it does go away. It's always going to be there until the Mashiach comes. There's going to be a time, and the Rambam, Maimonides, says it very clearly. There will be a time when the major change will come with the arrival of Mashiach, that all anti-Semitism, all the control that these foreign nations have had upon us will finally disappear.
Bayom hahu yeh echad u'shmo echad. Now it's interesting, reminds me of a story many years ago. I used to work on Wall Street, believe it or not. I don't know if you know that, actually.
I didn't know that, but I do believe it. Knowing you well, Rabbi.
I got to tell you a funny story afterwards. I can't share. I'm actually, if those of you who see me like waving my head back and forth, I'm in a parking spot in Brooklyn. I'm at a bar mitzvah. And when you're in a parking spot and your lights are on in Brooklyn, people are looking for parking spots. So every minute or so, another car pulls up. It's like, are you moving out? I'm not going anywhere. But I feel bad. I was working on Wall Street. I traded stocks for a very short period of time. A company called Euro Atlantic. At some other point, I'll tell the story. But in a nutshell, I'm walking down the street. I was working at 44 Wall Street, and there's this people holding the sign that says, the Jews control the media.
Yeah.
The Jews control the media, and I'm walking by and I'm feeling very uncomfortable with this because I'm clearly wearing a yarmulke and I'm walking down the street and I got my briefcase and I'm walking into this fancy building and I'm like, I'm exactly what they're talking about. And I walk by them and I put my head down in shame. But something got inside me, I get into these weird moods. So I decided I have to go back and say something to them. So I go back there and I said to them, "You're a liar. You guys are liars. We don't control the media. We control the world." And then I just ran out of there. Now, I'm going to say this, and those of you that are watching now, obviously, we're all friends. We're all part of the tribe here. But whoever watches this later, you have to understand, from a spiritual perspective, we believe that Jews have a very deep relationship to God and the spiritual realm. And we believe that everything in the physical world is an expression of spirituality. And therefore, when we say things like, yes, hello, Rabbi Fari, thank you for joining us. When we say things like, hey, the Jews control the weather, there's some truth to it. We pray for it twice a year. Okay, it's not crazy. You talk about, wealth and prosperity, we pray for it all the time. And therefore, on some level, everything they're saying has some truth. Do we have control over it like a machine where we push a button and therefore there are changes that happen? The answer is no, we don't. But our checking out my boys, Rabbi Fari is always checking out on his boys. But on some level, we have this profound responsibility on the other hand. Like, forget about how other people perceive us. If Jews, I really believe, if Jews were doing exactly what they were meant to be doing, there's no way to misconstrue who we are. And I think that's what Or L'Goyim means. And maybe that the way we, maybe the way we solve anti-Semitism isn't through these smart, educational programs where we make people go, meet with Holocaust survivors. But maybe the real program is to get Jews to start being Jewish.
Right. I mean, I always say the answer to anti-Semitism is Semitism. Right. Once we educate our people, so we understand what we're dealing with, then we have a chance of actually winning over this this misinformation, right? These libels, which go back. This is basically what it is. The Rothschilds, just another libel, another canard that's used against our people in order to hurt all of us. But you're right, there is a blessing. We know Avraham Avinu, right, was told that his descendants would be blessed, and there's a special bracha, but we're meant to be using that. I'm not saying we always have. We're going to be using that in order to bring blessing to the entire world, right? To bring divine consciousness. Basically, that's what Avraham did, and his descendants are chosen to do. And that takes time, effort, energy, and resources, right? Mo'adecha means the financial blessings that we get are meant to be injected and put into the success of the world in order to, again, bring Hashem and bring a moral and ethical code to the world itself. Unfortunately, there's people who don't want to know that because they don't even believe in God, right? They don't want to attribute anything to a higher spiritual plane. And so on the surface, once you remove God from that picture, you know what? It makes sense. Who are these Jews? Why are they all over the place? Why does every country get into economically prosper? How come every time they leave, right, the economies of those countries fold and disappear? They all collapse, whether it's Babylonia, or whether it's Egypt, or it's Spain in 1492, or whether it's Poland, or it's Germany, suddenly it disappears. So on the surface, if you don't put a spiritual component into the equation, you know what? What they say makes a little bit of sense. I mean, it's still crazy that we're controlling the weather, like this guy said about the Rothschilds, but in the end, it does make some sense. So what we need to do is once we invest HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, into the equation, suddenly it's like, aha. You got that aha moment. There's something going on over here, right? There's a spiritual component. There's a reasoning and a rationale behind our success, behind the fact that we win all these Nobel Prizes, more than any other nation, right, throughout history. Whatever it is, there's going to be a certain amount of logic that comes to it that's like, there's different pieces and they can all come together, right? So those 6 reasons that we gave for anti-Semitism at the beginning, which we'll do again, make sense as excuses if you remove God. Racial theory, right? The Jewish people are not a race, but we are we're a nation, right? Ish echad b'lev echad. We are one nation. Outsiders, because God put us into galut, into exile, in order to go around the world and to spread divine consciousness and to bring converts in, right? They hate us because we hate Jesus, killed Jesus supposedly, deicide, and rejected Christianity. Yeah, we did, because that for us is a form of avodah zarah, idol worship, and we don't accept that. We're the scapegoat. Even that expression scapegoat comes from Judaism, right? From the Yom Kippur service. But yeah, that makes sense as well, because God says, you know what? Someone's going to have to stand up and fulfill the spiritual mission of this world. And we're the chosen people. We said already, chosen to do what? Right? I could choose someone, but what am I choosing you for? I could choose you to clean my car. I may not like that. Choosing to do Torah and mitzvot. And of course, the economic success we have comes from Avraham Avinu. We see from those early days, in order to channel blessing and kemach and Torah. If there's no success financially, you can't afford to have influence and power to bring divine consciousness to the world. So you're right. All these things make sense if you remove Hashem from the equation, which is exactly what the Nazis did. Right? Hitler himself was quick to remove any form of godliness of the world. And how did he kill God? He killed the Jews. That was the way he did it. So it makes sense.
You have a comment here from Bavli, who said, we could be the greatest or the worst, which is so true. There's a Sanza Rebbe who says that the reason why the Torah was given to the Jewish people, that because we needed it more than any other people on planet Earth, that if we didn't have it, we would have wiped off the planet without it. You have over here Moshe Shama saying that the Safra brothers, alav shalom, never tried to be number one in their banking business in any country. And this did not apply to Eretz Yisrael. But we know that there were plenty of great, successful businessmen in the Jewish world who no one speaks about
Right.
all the chesed they did and all the people they helped, both in the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world. You know, how much money was given, the hospitals, the research, the vaccines, all the things that Jews have contributed in the most positive way. You know, you don't hear either because it's just no one wants to give credibility for the good.
Well, that would break the spell that they're trying to put out. The Jews are there to harm the world, are there to take over the world for their own nefarious financial gain, and that's exactly what they're trying to do with those theories. And I think we have to be very careful. I don't make excuses, but we Jewish people, we have to, I think, fly below the radar. I get nervous. When the Jewish people are out there in your face, showing up just a little edge. Take a little edge off. You can be successful, have nice houses and cars, be successful, Baruch Hashem, right? And giving tzedakah, of course, right? That's a good thing. That should be public. I'm a big believer in publicly giving charity, right? So people learn and see and make it a kiddush Hashem. But when it comes to our financial success, it has to just right? And the Safra brothers actually were very, very much like that. They were very tnuah, and they are to this very day in terms of how they give their tzedakah and how they live.
Right. One last question, because it's getting late already. You know, we are living in a time of more disinformation and conspiracy theories, and we've had about 4 weeks of conversation about all kinds of conspiracy theories. I'm just curious, I have my own answer. I'm curious what you have to say about what should people be doing today when they're hearing information, you know, reading the news or hearing things about, you know, all kinds of things, vaccines and, you know, protests and armed resistance and whatnot. How do we find truth in a world that seems to be losing its edge on anything real?
So that's a very, very big question. And I have to kind of like download that into my head in order to figure it out. There's no doubt about it. I have a lot to say on that. Maybe that's a talk in and of itself, is how we're meant to react to all this, this misinformation, disinformation that we're getting from everywhere, by the way, from everywhere.
My new standard, not sure if you noticed this from our posts, my new standard is that if I see anything, I assume it's false. I have to start assuming
that's your go-to.
Yeah, that's it. My new default is it's false unless you could prove to me that it's true, because that's the world we're in right now.
Yeah,
I can't assume that any news article is true. I can't assume that any WhatsApp post is true or anything is true. I have to assume it's all false. And if something kind of like, you know, I suspect it, you know, I want to find out if it's true, I'll do the research into it and find out whether or not it's true or not.
Before Mashiach comes, what the Mishnah says is that we're going to see a lot of sheker throughout the world, a lot of falsehood, and the emes is going to be neder. Only a few pockets of truth. It's going to be very hard to see who has the real truth, and that's not a coincidence, right? Part of that is going to be the clear the way for Mashiach to come. Yeah.
All right. So, how do you want to end this?
I want to end where we started, and I want to say that you're right. It's difficult, and anti-Semitism is not going to go away, and the 6 reasons for them and excuses are still there, but it is going to be good. We know in the end that the truth does come out, and the emet, truth, will stand. Sheker, as we know, falls eventually, and we're going to see, God willing, coming of Mashiach B'ezrat Hashem, and the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, which we should always at least have in our minds, and it's going to have a good ending. It's going to have a good ending. How we get there, I think, is a lot of it's going to be based upon us. A lot of it's going to be based upon us and how we take in the information and the events of this world and how much we connect our own people. Because unfortunately, Jewish people can become our own worst enemies. Fighting anti-Semitism is to build Semitism.
I have a final thought that I want to share with everyone to build off of everything that we spoke about tonight. I think that because we live in olam, we say that olam hazeh is olam deshikra, it's a world of lies, and we're getting closer to truth. We're getting closer to bringing truth into the world. But in order to bring truth into the world, you have to fight for it. We've been relying on so much of what the world has provided for us with the World Wide Web, what I call AG after Google. Everything is there, and it's so easy to have access to facts and information. If you want to live in a world of truth, and this is true for anti-Semitism today, for every human being today, we live in a world that people are not willing to put in the effort to discover what is true. Is Judaism true? Is Torah true? Mm-hmm. Is this news article true? If you're not going to spend time unearthing or learning how to unearth, finding the facts, you're going to be controlled by whatever's being said. Right. And so that's unfortunate. And so my bracha to each of us is that we move forward to a world that brings truth, but recognizing that in order to bring anything meaningful into the world, you got to put a lot of effort into it. Right. It takes effort and information and knowledge. And I think on this topic, I think next week, God willing, we're going to be doing the false messiahs. Is that right?
Yeah,
is that
next week we're going to be doing false messiahs. Yeah.
I have a lot to say about that.
That's a lot. By the way, I was thinking we might have to do like a part 1 and part 2 with that. There's so much there.
No, we'll crunch it in. We'll crunch it in.
All right, awesome.
I have a lot to say on that.
Does anyone have any questions before we head out? Now's your chance to post them. I got a private message that says that we have to also be more united and more compassionate towards each other, which is also true. And I think that's
true.
Part of, by the way, that's part of looking for truth. If you're not going to jump to judge, if you're going to stop and really reflect about what you're seeing, you'll automatically have more compassion to the people around you.
Yeah, 1000%. We know that the antidote to anti-Semitism, like anything in the natural world, how do you fight off an enemy? Through achdut, right? Right? It's one fish is in big trouble, but if you're part of a school of fish, you'll be able to protect yourself. The Jewish people are no different. Ish echad b'lev echad, when we act together as one people, we can fight off the worst misinformation, disinformation, the worst armies and the worst threats. That's a very, very crucial ingredient that I'm pleased someone mentioned. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. God willing, we will see you all next week for False Messiahs. Shavua Tov. Have an amazing week. Live in peace and find truth. Go to everybody.
Bye.
Shavua Tov, rabbis.